there, it's Amanda, and I am founder of the Hinman Holistic Health Institute and creator of the Hinman Family Health Method. And today we're going to talk a little bit about food allergies or insensitivities, things like gluten intolerances and anaphylactic allergies to nuts and tree nuts, eggs, those kind of things. So for some reason, this seems to be escalating in our children today. I don't know if you have a child that is affected by one of these situations, but I want to share a little bit of information about two different areas that may be not something that you've really thought about much before. Maybe it has, but hopefully this will provide some new insight and just different perspectives. The first is the impact of the circulatory system, and the second is the impact of the nervous system, and how those two systems play a large role in your child's challenges with food or with intolerances. So, you know, these different challenges can provide a whole array of symptoms. People with gluten intolerances, for example, can have anything from, you know, difficulty concentrating, foggy brain, inflammation in different parts of the body, the brain, as well as the digestive system. Some people end up having celiac disease, where it really affects the internal digestion, as well as irritable bowel syndrome, and also affects things, believe it or not, like arthritis and achy joints and difficulty just kind of with all a whole bunch of areas of our body. And then when we think of food allergies, you know, the most severe example is like an anaphylactic reaction, where it literally can become inflammation of the throat or the neck and become a life-threatening situation very rapidly. Other allergic reactions can be things like hives or skin irritations and just all sorts of inflammation. Inflammation is essentially where the body is signaling there's a problem and it's trying to bring something to the surface to cause a response or an awareness. So what does our circulatory system and our nervous system have to do with the food that then causes an allergic reaction or some type of inflammatory intolerance? We're going to talk and dive into that a little bit more today. And first I want to, you're going to bear with me while I draw some pictures. I'm not the best drawer, but I think you'll get the idea. Talk about the importance of our circulatory system, right? So this is obviously your blood is flowing throughout your entire body all the time, and it's the supply of information, right? Everything is information, from the food that we take in to the air that we breathe and the hormones that are processed from all of our different pituitary glands, thyroid gland, different adrenals that are floating around our body and making it function the way it does. So the role of our liver is very important to understand. Let's pretend that's a little liver over there. I'll put an L on it so you remember. The liver is an organ located in the abdominal area that is responsible for taking all of our blood and detoxifying it or cleaning it out, right? So as I mentioned, those environmental toxins from our food, pesticides, herbicides, from our air, from the water we drink, the chlorine and the fluoride, as well as quite honestly, the largest percentage of internal toxins in our blood comes from our own metabolic waste, from all of the chemical reactions and processes that happen every single second of every single day, and our own hormonal output. So all of those hormones, like I told you, cortisol, adrenaline, neopinephrine, epinephrine, all of these hormones that are constantly flooding our body's circulatory system to make functions happen. The liver is the organ that is responsible for taking this blood in, cleaning it out, and then creating a substance called bile that it sends it out through. And bile is really important. Bile is, I'm going to kind of do a little blow-up drawing here of, pretend that this is a cross-section of an artery or a vein, right? So after leaving the liver, this bile flows through to hang out in what's called the interior part of our ileum, and it waits until we eat, because when we eat, also contained in this bile are enzymes that help us break apart our food. So when we eat, the bile and the food mix together and kind of mash up and have a little party, and bile loves soluble fiber. So when we eat foods that contain soluble fiber, bile and fiber stick together, like they get married and they're never going to leave each other. They are like glue. And they stick together, and the great reason that that is so helpful is because fiber can never cross back through the blood barrier. It cannot cross the intestinal lining. So once your bile with all of that excess garbage that I talked about sticks to soluble fiber, it can't go back into the body through the blood supply. It can't be reabsorbed. It has to then move a different path and go out of the body in the form of a bowel movement. So when we have consistent, Dr. Oz always talks about your poop and how important it is, and it really is, and this is why. When you have consistent, solid, regular, dark-colored poops or bowel movements, that is when you know that you have bile that's bound with fiber and leaving the body. One thing to look out, and it's a big aha, is if you have a child that is struggling with some type of food allergy or gluten intolerance, and you happen to look at their bowel movements and they're light colored, that is a first red flag, because bile is dark in color. So if their bowel movements are very light colored, then chances are a lot of this bile that is creating all of the toxins and all the garbage from the liver is not ever exiting the body. So what happens if we don't have that consistent and frequent amounts of soluble fiber? Well, for some people, up to 95% of the bile that is containing the garbage, after it leaves our liver, it goes down and it gets reabsorbed back into the blood supply. And this is where it's important to understand how it impacts allergies and inflammation. I'm going to have a little, let's see here, we'll do a little color blue. There are some particles that float through our body known as antigens. So these are things that are dead, no longer a threat, just kind of the body's immune system is able to look at that and say, oh, that's just an antigen, that's something old and garbage, it's going to go to the liver, it's going to be placed into the bile, and it'll leave the body. I don't have to do anything to that, don't have to worry, it's not dangerous. And then there are other things that are called allergens. Let's give those the little red guys. So when allergens start to float through our blood supply, it kind of puts our body's immune system on high alert. Your immune system says, well, wait a second, these allergens are things that could become dangerous if they start to multiply in number. And allergen is something that it thinks has the potential to continue to grow. So allergen can cause a triggered response, meaning it causes inflammation or it causes an allergic reaction, some type of response to signal, hello, we got to do something here because this is a severe problem. So let's go back to the liver example. If we have a scenario where a person is eating foods, but those foods unfortunately do not contain soluble fiber or not high enough amounts of soluble fiber, then when this bile is created carrying all the toxins and all the garbage that's supposed to leave the body, all of these pieces and particles that are floating through our blood that are supposed to be out to the toilet, they get dumped right back in. So the next time it recirculates, guess what happens? We have some more of these start to show up, and some more allergens start to show up. And then pretty soon the body's immune system might get confused and say, wait a second, I thought these were all antigens. They're not really a threat, but maybe I was wrong because they just keep multiplying. Maybe those really are a threat. So now this is where you get massive inflammation and massive allergic reaction. When those particles and those pieces just keep reappearing instead of leaving the body through the form of a bowel movement, that causes an inflammatory response in the body. So this may be surprising for some people, but I want you to know, I personally know of people that have been able to heal completely from celiac disease and are able to eat wheat and gluten products, or even anaphylactic peanut allergies that were life-threatening, and now in due time, once things balance, are able to eat peanuts and tree nuts and other things with no problem. So I want to kind of put that glimmer of hope out there that there is a possibility of really over time finding a way to balance the body so that this is cleaned up and all of that stuff is removed from the body. And then we're going to get into this next piece, the nervous system, how that impacts our immune function and how it will help our immune system correctly identify true dangers and those that really don't cause a substantial threat to our survival. So I hope this piece was helpful. The takeaway from this is what contains soluble fiber, right? So you're saying, okay, Amanda, you're telling me that soluble fiber is going to provide this cleansing, detoxifying ability for my liver to produce bile, which will bind with the fiber and then exit the body in the form of a bowel movement. Absolutely. What foods contain fiber? Well, we all know fruits and vegetables contain some fiber, and they are definitely healthy to eat. However, the amount of fruits and vegetables that would have to be consumed to have really material amounts of soluble fiber is very large. So like a bathtub full of fruits and vegetables in a day. That's not very likely for most people, especially children. So some foods to think about adding into your routine way of eating are legumes. I'm going to put them over here. Or beans. So beans are actually, per size, the highest percentage of soluble fiber than any other food. So eating beans, any kind of beans, kidney beans, black beans, garbanzo beans, pinto beans, cannelli beans, lentils, all of these beans, and you can pick which variety works with you. Even get creative and use things like bean flour when you're baking. Fava bean flour, garbanzo bean flour I've used in pancake mixes and stuff. Beans, also seeds contain chia seeds and flax seeds. Those are great sources of soluble fiber. So whenever possible, if you can help increase the soluble fiber in your child's daily eating, it's multiple times a day if possible, that's even better. That's going to help clear out all of this buildup in their blood supply, in their circulatory system. So that's the first piece that I wanted to share information about. And then we're going to move into the nervous system. And why is the nervous system so important when it comes to food allergies and gluten intolerance? Well, the nervous system, the anatomic nervous system, has what I call like two modes of functioning here. So I'm going to draw a little light switch. Think of it like a light switch where your light is either flipped on or flipped off, right? So when the light is flipped on, that is a correlation to what we call the sympathetic nervous system response. And when you're in sympathetic response mode, that means all of the sensory perception is heightened. Your sense of smell, your sense of touch, your sense of taste and hearing, and what is the other one I'm missing? Vision. I said vision, but you know, the five senses, they're all on high alert. So when this is turned on high, your body's resources and energy is focused on perceiving your environment. And why is that? Well, that's also known as the fight or flight or freeze response, the adrenaline response. And it's really kind of back to caveman days when we used to have to fight and flee for survival, right? We had to really be aware of our environment because there was a lot potential for life-threatening danger. When this is triggered, your body's resources are all focused on supporting large gross motor movement in case you have to run to save your life. If a tiger is chasing you, you better be on your heels fast. Or if a boulder is in your way and you got to move it over. These large gross motor movement is storing energy. And then the another piece is, like I said, the sensory perception. Being able to hear, was that an animal? Was that a fox that I heard in the grass, ruttling grass over there, or you know, anything like that. So your body's focus is all on life-saving energy. Now the other side of it is if you were to flip your light switch off, that's called the parasympathetic mode or the parasympathetic response in the nervous system. And when you're on off mode, that is actually when your body has the ability to focus its resources and its energy on your immune system, supporting it for optimal functioning, your reproduction system, so balancing hormones, as well as your digestion, so being able to really break apart and absorb your food or your child's food. And unfortunately, so many people today in our society are living chronically with their nervous system in the sympathetic mode. Now, I'm going to say both of these are very important. In fact, I think they're equally important and they should be balanced in our life. But when we are too far tilted one way, we are losing the benefit of some of the other resources in our body to their fullest extent. So let's go back to what I was talking about up here, right? If the immune system is, if the nervous system is turned on, then that makes the immune system low priority. So when our nervous system is on, immune system is low priority. It's not functioning really well. And remember how I talked about sometimes it can get confused between antigens and allergens, and then things keep reappearing. It's not able to even really sort through this information, and it's being overwhelmed on top of it when our nervous system, when our light switch is flipped on all the time. So what can we do to help flip that light switch off? Well, actually, before I go into that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why it's turned on so often. You know, you may think, well, you know, my child isn't running to save his life. My child isn't in severe threat for his well-being. Why would his nervous system be turned on? Well, excess stimulation, right? So an active environment where there's lots of sounds and lights and noises and tastes and smells can turn someone's light switch on. Also, your thoughts. So the more that you have worried or anxious or uncertain, self-doubting thoughts, mental chatter, what I call, that right there is enough to turn it on. Unfortunately, the nervous system is controlled by what I call the reptilian part of our brain. It's not complex enough to go through rational thinking and say, wait a second, is this really a life-threatening situation, or is this just my own head thinking? It doesn't process that way. It either is on or off, and if there's a perceived threat or perceived worry or perceived fear about something, it flips it on regardless. So even if that worry is really non-reality, it's still going to trigger the light switch to be flipped on. So now knowing that that has the potential to be on at a high number of hours and minutes throughout the day, what can we do to help our children turn their light switch off and strengthen their immune system? Well, some things we can do to help balance their nervous system are simply things like physical touch. The humans crave connection, and oftentimes as little kids, we have no problem giving our kids hugs and cuddles and kisses, but for some reason as they get older, sometimes that just tends to fall off a little bit or lessen. So I would encourage you to give even your older kids hugs, rub their shoulders, see if you can, rub their legs, little things like that where there's literally physical connection. That's a very calming response for the body, especially with the nervous system. Another thing that helps balance out the nervous system is to decrease that artificial stimulation. So like I talked about, artificial lighting is very overpowering. Our eyes take in the most information than any other sense. And when we are inside under artificial lights or looking at blue light from screens, TVs, tablets, phones, all of that is very straining on our eyesight. So getting outside, especially with summer coming up, spending more time outdoors, the natural sunlight is actually the opposite. It's calming of the nervous system and invigorating for the body. So being outside is a great way to spend some time to turn that light switch off and increase the immunity. And finally, like I said, really helping to understand your child's own chatter, maybe kind of talking them through. If there's someone that gets anxious before tests at school, or worries about what their friends are going to say or anything like that, helping them through that and supporting them to kind of release that, allow them to talk it out or to journal or some other way to allow that to kind of release and come out of them, because the more it stays internal, and even if it's just in their own head, their thoughts are going to trigger that same sympathetic light switch turned on response in their body, which causes the immune function to deteriorate, as well as digestion. So I hope that was helpful information. 2 different parts to kind of look at differently about food allergies and gluten intolerances relating to the circulatory system as well as the nervous system. Your takeaways are trying to add some beans or some fiber into your child's diet, especially on a daily basis. That would be optimal. And another strategy is to add some extra cuddle time, some more comforting downtime or time outside. Enjoy the summer months when the weather warms up. And I hope those tips are helpful. We would love to hear from you, whether you think this was helpful or not, or if you have other suggestions, please put a comment below. And if you're seeing this anywhere but our blog, then you can go there and comment as well. Feel free to share this with anyone that you think would receive the value. Thank you.